Well, of course, an area where the market is literally bursting with opportunity, the green jobs market, with job postings that have increased 8% over the last 5 years. But like other industries, there's not enough talent to match the demand. And so to talk more about that, I'm joined by Evan Hynes. He is the CEO and founder of ClimateBase. That is a jobs platform for people and organizations dedicated to fighting climate change and advancing sustainability. And Bhushan Sethi is a joint global leader for people and organization at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Welcome to both of you. Evan Hynes, I want to begin with you. First of all, walk us through what type of talent you're looking for in the green jobs market.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Right now we're seeing an incredible growth in climate tech. And when we think about climate jobs at ClimateBase, that's really where we're focused. A lot of the sort of green jobs that are talked about right now are primarily jobs working in energy. We hear a lot about solar installation. We hear a lot about the growth of sustainability as a role, but we view that as kind of just the tip of the iceberg. The organizations that are on ClimateBase are the organizations that are tasked with scaling the climate solutions that humanity desperately needs. And they need all kinds of people to be joining their teams, from software engineers to salespeople, marketing, lawyers, and so on. So it's really across the entire spectrum of the talent landscape.
And is this a generational issue, Evan Hynes, or are we seeing it across all sectors of the economy and all age brackets in this country?
Well, what we're seeing right now is that overwhelmingly young people are prioritizing careers that have a clear impact on the environment, a positive impact on the environment. In fact, I saw a recent study that showed over 50% of millennials surveyed, and this is 2 years ago, so I'm sure the data has already increased. I'm sure this number is even higher for Gen Z, but that over 50% of millennials surveyed reported saying that they would take a pay cut in order to work for an organization that has a strong environmental mission. What's interesting too is that stat is also surprisingly high for older generations. So we're seeing, I would say, a true revolution, if I may call it, coin it on the spot. The climate work revolution, I think, is something that is really impacting a lot of people. And part of that, I think, is because COVID really spurred the Great Resignation, and it's created a space for people to really reflect and think about their careers and really decide if this is what they want to be doing with their lives, whatever it was before. I think as the climate crisis has worsened and continues to be just truly horrific, people are beginning to wake up and say, you know what, maybe there's an opportunity for me to do something in my career and go full in on climate with a 40-hour opportunity to work on climate solutions.
Bhushan Sethi, you look at the numbers at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and as you look at this sector of the economy, geographically, is there a part of the country where it is growing the most?
I think when we look at different sectors, it's definitely relevant in energy, and energy's had to get a head start, as Evan's mentioned, in terms of thinking about alternative fuels. But we see it really in every sector: technology, thinking about the carbon footprint, supply, manufacturing, looking at supply chains that extend beyond the US. So we see it as relevant in every single sector. I think one of the challenges for businesses is, whilst consumers want this, stakeholders want this, many employees, especially that skew younger, want this, there is a disconnect in our society in that when we think about climate and green jobs, it can easily get politicized. So we really need to kind of over-index on the messaging, eliminate the fear, and highlight, as Evan mentioned, there's a breadth of opportunities around different skills, around technology, around environment, around engineering, around other kind of core human skills.
But if you agree with the premise that there are some inequities in the green jobs market, where are they? And how do you address those inequities?
I think they're twofold. One is there seems to be a slight disconnect between businesses and business leaders and employees. So we did a survey last year to talk about the level of investments in climate. 50% of business leaders say they're investing, 30% of their employees are saying that they're investing. So business, and then we've seen this through the pandemic, that business leaders have a slightly different view to their employees. So really needing to kind of message how we make investments, how we changing the way we develop products, how we making decisions around our supply chain, what are we going to disclose and put in our executives' incentives around that, and relevant for employees, how do we manage the transition? Because you don't automatically learn about solar and wind power and engineering and all of this climate technology. There needs to be a transition plan. There needs to be an investment in skills, and that's where different stakeholders need to come together. So I think that's where firms that can get on the front foot to kind of manage that with their employees are going to have to focus.
And Mr. Sethi, that also means social responsibility. So what does that mean to you? And what can an employee bring to an employer on that front?
I think we've seen a rise of employee activism. I think we see that employees want to work with firms that are aligned with their own purpose. We see that in the 80s and 90s in terms of percentages. There's a big role for leaders there. A lot of people call this woke leadership. For us, it's just about being compassionate. It's about, as an employer, talking about your social responsibility, making sure that leaders are acting in that way, and we're bringing all stakeholders along. That doesn't mean everyone has to agree with every single thing in the workplace, but it means that we have to have respect and tolerance and talk about the benefits for green jobs, for societies, for business models, for jobs and economic security.
And Evan Hynes, I'm curious if you could just spend a moment to tell us your story, because you personally, you faced some obstacles to get where you're at today.
Yeah, so I started ClimateBase with my team because I wanted to work in climate. Specifically, as someone who was coming from the startup space, I was hoping to find an opportunity in climate tech. At that time, I was sort of looking for those opportunities. That term, climate tech, was not even commonly used. And over the past 2.5 years, we've been able to help now over 500,000 people find and apply to over 30,000 jobs at over 3,000 organizations that have joined our platform. And I want to be clear that my story is really one that I think resonates with a lot of people, because a lot of people want to go all in on climate, and they're wondering, what can I do? How can I do that? Well, working on climate is probably the most effective way of doing it. Actually getting paid to spend your 40 hours a week working on this. And at ClimateBase, we've sort of started with answering, I think, the most important question that people are asking, which is, well, what are those jobs and where do they exist? So that's where we've started. But what we've discovered along the way is that it's not just about job discovery, though that is the number one challenge that people report in our surveys. It's also about building a community, building a professional network, since so many people get jobs through people that they know. And it's also around education. In order to really navigate the climate tech and the climate jobs landscape, it does truly help to have a baseline understanding of climate solutions. So that is the challenge that we're focused on addressing at ClimateBase, is how can we get more people to work on climate?
So the same question to both of you, and Bhushan Sethi, I want to begin with you. At this moment, when it comes to clean, green energy and green jobs, where are we in parlance to the technology to get us there?
I think where, many of the businesses that have to decarbonize there's huge investments, as Evan mentioned, around the technology. But from a people lens, I think we're early in terms of the messaging that unites everyone. But a lot of people still think of this as political, and there's some intolerance around that. I think the more that we can kind of create a narrative, the more that we can actually publish some successful stories like Evan's and others, and the more we can get large companies to start disclosing everything around kind of ESG, I think we'll go a lot further.
How do you get to those companies, though?
I think that's where we get to the power of consumers. We get to the power of kind of stakeholder capitalism. We get to measure. We get individual employees to tell their stories around how they're being upskilled, how they're creating opportunities for themselves, and how different firms are supporting that. Whether you're financing businesses, whether you're in the tech and data business to report around it, whether you're in the core kind of decarbonization of those business models.
Evan Hynes, same question to you. Kind of getting a sense of where are we right now in terms of technology and green jobs? How far have we come? And maybe adding to that the challenges moving forward.
Well, shameless plug, we're preparing to put out our first ever ClimateBase jobs report. We're going to be breaking down all the over 30,000 jobs that have been posted to our platform by sector, solution, breaking down between emissions reductions versus carbon removal. And so, we're going to have some really compelling data to report on in the very near future. And I would encourage folks to stay tuned and follow along. But, I just want to quickly respond to what was said earlier, about climate still being politicized. It unfortunately is a political issue. I want to make that very clear. We subsidize oil and gas to an egregious degree. at a time when we really need to be rapidly transitioning away from a fossil-fueled economy. And I also want to point out that, the majority of young Republicans at this point recognize that human-caused climate change is real, and they want to do something about it. When you look at the oil and gas workforce as well, the majority of them are eager to shift into a different role within renewable energy. So, this notion that that we need to be sensitive in terms of the messaging. I mean, I tend to disagree. I think right now we need to strike while the iron is hot, and we need to recognize the fact that overwhelmingly people of all different kinds of political backgrounds recognize that climate change is here and that they want to do something about it.
So, Bhushan Sethi, is this a pivot point on what Evan Hynes is just alluding to?
I think it has to be. We're obviously going to get temporary shocks like the terrible war in Ukraine is going to impact supply chain and behaviors. We're going to get rising inflation, potentially a recession next year. I totally agree that we need to manage that. What people don't like in this country is being told what to do and what to think. And the more that we as business community and leaders and advisors can kind of support that in our messaging to kind of reduce the polarization, I think that's where we need to focus.
So if you could take us ahead 10 years in 2032, what will this issue look like from your standpoint, from your perspective?
I would hope it would go the way that many of the digital aspects have gone, in that they're embedded as part of business models and the way that we engage, and that we're focused very much on execution and exploration around, alternative business models. I hope so for the sake of our children and our grandchildren.
And Evan Hynes, final question for you. For those looking to move into this sector, it seems what you're saying and what the numbers are indicating, this is a growth area.
Absolutely. And I also just want to, first I'll just say, we've seen the amount of capital going into climate tech, climate solutions more broadly even. We've seen it double year over year for the past 4 years straight. It nearly tripled between 2020 and 2021, and I would predict that it's probably going to quadruple between 2021 and this year. So yes, we are seeing incredible amounts of job growth, and I want to emphasize that there are opportunities truly for everyone. My message to anyone watching that works in high technology or any real sort of white collar role is that if you care about climate change, you can and you probably should find a way of transitioning into working on climate. And finally, I just want to say that, what Bhushan was talking about in regards to people don't like being told what to do. So much of the discourse and the conversation around individual climate action, as in what can individuals do when it comes to having a meaningful impact on climate, so much of the conversation is around our consumptive behaviors. Don't eat this, don't drive this, don't fly too much. It's all these don't statements. And I agree, people don't respond well to that. So I would encourage folks to recognize that the number one most impactful thing that individuals can do is not a don't statement. It is a get paid to work on climate solutions statement. And not only are these jobs abundant and growing and opportunities abound for everyone, but on top of that, they're deeply fulfilling. There's nothing like working on a problem that you deeply care about and going to bed at the end of the day knowing that you've really made a real difference.
Two very important points and perspectives. My thanks to you, Evan Hynes, the CEO and founder. The organization is called ClimateBase, and Bhushan Sethi. He is the joint global leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. To both of you, appreciate you being with us.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.